Welcome to the deep dive. We're going deep today into something, really fundamental. Parental expectations and how a parent's hopes for their child's schooling can really make a difference.
It's fascinating stuff, actually.
Yeah, and what makes this even more intriguing is how these expectations and the effects they have, aren't universal. They're not the same across all racial and ethnic groups.
Right.
We've been looking into a bunch of research, and it reveals some, well, surprising patterns in the reasons driving those differences.
That's right. Yeah.
And for our listeners out there, you want to be in the know quickly and thoroughly. We've sifted through all the academic stuff to bring you the key insights. So think of this as a crash course,
The deep dive.
a deep dive, right?
Hmm.
Our mission today is to really grasp the complexity of parental expectations within different cultures and pinpoint what really drives their influence on a child's academic success. And where are we getting all this from?
Yeah, so we've done a comprehensive review of numerous studies on this topic.
Okay, so let's start with what seems intuitive, right? We all probably think that when parents have high hopes for their kids in school, it generally leads to, good stuff, better grades, more motivation, persistence, that kind of thing.
And that intuition, is often backed by research.
And it seems logical, right? You would expect that kind of encouragement to push kids towards, even aiming for college.
Yeah, it does. However, and this is crucial to keep in mind, much of that early research really honed in on European American families, primarily middle class. And, well, as we dig deeper, you'll see it's not that straightforward.
Right. Things get more interesting, don't they?
They do. It gets much more nuanced when you factor in the tapestry of different cultural backgrounds that, we have in our society.
So let's jump into some of those nuances. First off, a really significant finding is that Asian American parents consistently have considerably higher academic expectations for their children compared to, well, European American, African American, and Latino parents.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a subtle difference, it's a significant gap. There's this study from '94 by Pang and Wright, and they found that a whopping 80% of Asian American parents with 8th grade kids expected at least a bachelor's degree for their child.
Wow.
Now, contrast that with, let's say, Latino parents, around 50% had that expectation. Then for African-American parents, it was 58%. And for European-American parents, 62%.
So pretty significant difference there.
Yeah. And what's striking is that this gap often remains even when you compare families with, similar incomes and education levels.
What we call socioeconomic status.
Exactly. Socioeconomic status. It suggests that something else is at play, right?
Absolutely. Something beyond just economic factors. And, what's remarkable is how consistently this pattern emerges across various studies.
Yeah.
It really hints at maybe different cultural values or beliefs about the importance of higher education, perhaps even its attainability.
Right, right. Now, when we shift our focus to Latino and African American parents, the picture gets a little less clear-cut in terms of their expectations relative to European Americans.
Yeah.
Some studies show lower expectations, but then there's research. Like Suizo and Stapleton, they found higher expectations among Latino parents, but specifically for their kids entering kindergarten.
Mm-mm.
And when it comes to African American parents, the results are, well, mixed, especially when you adjust for those socioeconomic factors we talked about.
So it's not as simple as saying one group always has higher or lower expectations.
Right. It's more complex than that. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. And thinking bigger picture here, it's crucial to remember that broad categories like, Latino encompass a whole spectrum of diverse subgroups, each with unique histories and experiences. And then even the age of the child, when we're trying to measure these expectations, can sway the findings. And even the way researchers phrase those questions about expectations, that can impact the results.
So it's are we missing some of the finer details when we make these big sweeping comparisons?
It's a valid point. It's always good to be aware of the limitations.
Now let's talk about how parents actually form these expectations.
Right.
Right. It's natural to assume they look at their child's past performance in school to kind of predict how they'll do in the future.
That's a very reasonable assumption. You'd expect a child's grades, test scores, their overall academic history to really heavily shape what their parents anticipate for them down the line.
And it makes sense. But here's where things get a little unexpected. For parents from racial and ethnic minority groups, a child's previous academic performance doesn't seem to be as strong of a factor in shaping their expectations, at least compared to European American parents.
That is a crucial distinction.
Yeah. So for European American parents, strong performance in the past, that might be a clear signal of continued success,
Uh,
leading to higher expectations. But for many minority parents, that connection is less direct, it seems.
that's right.
And we even see evidence for this from studies done, in different countries. There's this study from South Africa from 2008 focusing on 11th graders, and they found that the students' literacy and numeracy scores in 8th grade, they predicted parental expectations, but only for whites, not for blacks.
Interesting.
And then a U.S. study back in '92 found that minority parents often held higher educational aspirations for their ninth graders, even when those kids had lower GPAs compared to European American students with similar grades.
So it really challenges that, seemingly obvious link between past performance and future expectations. And it's not just about race and ethnicity either.
No.
No, research also suggests that this relationship changes based on a family's socioeconomic status. So
Mhm.
lower income families often show a larger gap between, how a child's actually performing and their parents' expectations for their education.
Right, right. And this was highlighted in a study by Alexander and others in '94. So the question becomes why? Why would past performance hold less weight for some groups? And the research points to three main factors that help explain this.
The first of these is the parent's core belief about what actually drives success in academics. Is it mainly hard work and effort, or is it more about innate ability, like talent you're born with?
That's an important distinction. So a parent who believes that success hinges on effort, they might not fixate as much on past performance. They might think, hey, even if my kid hasn't been stellar so far, with enough dedication, they can still improve.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is the cultural dimension to this belief. Studies have shown consistently that Asian American parents tend to emphasize heavily the importance of effort over innate ability when it comes to, academic achievement.
It's like, hard work can overcome any obstacle.
Yeah, and this belief system, backed by research from the late 80s and early 90s, might explain why past performance is less rigid in shaping their expectations for the future.
It's not the be-all and end-all.
Right. And it's not just about, effort versus ability in a general sense. The research even suggests that different groups might have different ideas about what academic ability even means. So European American parents often focus on, the more traditional measures like analytical skills, verbal
Like,
skills.
can they solve this math problem?
Right. But then, if you look at broader cultural values, minority parents might have a more holistic view of what constitutes academic ability. They might include things like motivation, self-management, even social competence.
So it's like, are they a good person? Are they a hard worker? Can they get along with others?
Exactly. And research from the 90s backs this up. Some studies found that, for example, Mexican immigrant parents see morals and social skills as interconnected with academic success. And Vietnamese and Filipino immigrant parents, they view motivation as a core part of intelligence.
Wow, that's fascinating. So if you believe that academic ability is this broader concept, you might be more optimistic about a child's potential to improve, even if their grades haven't been, top-notch.
Right. In a Finnish study from 2002, it even found a link between a parent's own level of education and what aspects of ability they tend to focus on.
So how much schooling you yourself have had can influence how you view intelligence? Okay, that's factor one. What's the second factor that plays into this?
The second key factor that influences how past performance shapes expectations is the parent's level of understanding and trust in the feedback they're getting from the school.
Makes sense. So grades, test scores, teacher comments, all those things.
Exactly. All the things that signal how a child's doing academically.
So if you, as a parent, don't really grasp what those grades represent, or you don't have much faith in the teacher's judgment, you're probably not going to rely too heavily on that feedback when you're thinking about your child's future academically.
Exactly. You have to have confidence in the information you're getting.
Right. And our research points to some interesting differences here. For example, remember that '94 study we mentioned earlier?
Yes.
Well, it also found that European American parents were better at recalling their child's past grades compared to African American parents.
Hmm.
This suggests that they pay closer attention to the school's feedback and possibly have a stronger trust in it.
It's an interesting correlation.
Yeah. And we also can't overlook, the historical context here. The U.S. has a long history of racial discrimination. And Understandably, that's led to some mistrust towards teachers and the school system among some African American parents. This was highlighted in research from like the late 90s and early 2000s.
If you feel like the system might be biased against your child, you're probably less inclined to see a teacher's evaluation as a completely fair reflection of their true potential.
Right, it's not the whole story.
And that lack of trust can weaken the link between past performance and future expectations. On the flip side, if parents believe their kids are being assessed fairly, they're more likely to use that information to inform their expectations.
So building trust between schools and families, that's really key here.
It's fundamental.
Okay, so we got these two factors, believe in effort and trust in the school's feedback. What's the third piece of the puzzle?
The third piece is parental self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy.
Yeah, it's basically a parent's belief in their own ability to support their child's education effectively.
So it's not just about the child, it's about the parent's confidence in themselves.
Exactly. And this becomes particularly crucial as kids move up through school and the material gets tougher. Parents with less education themselves or fewer resources, they might feel less equipped to help with more complex schoolwork.
Like, I don't even remember how to do algebra.
Right. And if you lack confidence in your ability to provide that support, you might naturally have slightly lower expectations for your child, academically, even if they've done well in the past.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like I can only help them so much.
And this is a point that's been emphasized in research from the 80s, 90s, and even more recent studies.
It's a recurring theme.
It is. And this sense of self-efficacy is often tied to things like ethnicity, immigrant status, and, socioeconomic status. Immigrant parents, especially those facing language barriers or unfamiliar with the U.S. education system, can have real struggles supporting their kids' schooling.
It's a whole new world.
It is. And research from the early 2000s highlights that Latino immigrant parents in particular are often affected by this. They sometimes lack the same access to resources and support networks that might be available to other immigrant groups.
That's a really important point. Support networks make a huge difference.
They do.
And we've even seen that within specific ethnic groups, there can be significant differences. Like immigrant Mexican parents tend to have lower expectations compared to Mexican heritage parents born in the U.S.
Right.
And it's also interesting to consider how some cultural models, like the child-directed approach to education, sometimes seen among Latino parents of teenagers, might also shape how parents view their role in, guiding their kids' education.
It's about different parenting philosophies and how much direct control they feel they should exert.
Right. So these three factors, the belief in effort versus ability, understanding and trusting school feedback, and parental self-efficacy, they really paint a richer picture of why expectations might be formed differently across cultures and why past performance might carry different weight.
They're the why behind the what.
Exactly.
Oh.
So we've established that expectations can vary and that the past doesn't always predict the future, at least not equally for everyone. But what about the actual impact of these expectations on a child's achievement? Does that also differ depending on the group?
That's the million-dollar question. And while generally there is a positive link between high expectations and positive outcomes, our review shows that the strength of this link isn't universal.
Meaning?
It's consistently strong for European American families, but for Asian Americans and African Americans, the findings are less consistent. And surprisingly, the studies we looked at found no significant direct link between expectations and performance for Latino families.
That is a huge finding.
Yeah.
So just having high expectations doesn't automatically guarantee higher achievement for all groups.
Exactly. It's more complicated than that.
So what's going on here? Why the difference?
Well, the research suggests there might be 4 mediating processes at play. Think of these as the pathways, the how, by which expectations might shape a child's journey.
Mechanisms, the cogs in the machine?
Yeah, exactly. So the first pathway is the child's internalization of their parents' value of academic achievement.
So it's like, how much does the child buy into the idea that doing well in school is important?
Right. It's about parents communicating through their expectations that education matters. And kids pick up on this, they internalize it, and it can become self-fulfilling. If your parents believe you can succeed, you might start to believe it too and work harder to make it happen.
It's that, power of belief. And there are studies that back this up, showing a connection between parental expectations and students' own aspirations, sometimes even having long-term effects.
That's right. Like, A 2009 study found these effects lasting over time. However, how strong that internalization is, that can vary between groups.
So the message doesn't always get through equally.
It seems that way. Some research suggests that for Latino students with immigrant parents, the link between what the parents expect and what the student expects might be weaker compared to non-Latino students with immigrant parents.
Mhm.
And how information and values about schooling are passed on within the family, that might be a factor here. It could be more difficult in some immigrant families due to language barriers or unfamiliarity with the school system.
Yeah, navigating a new system can be tough. And it's not just about general communication either, right? Some groups might be more direct about expressing their expectations.
Absolutely. Our sources mention a study on low-income Asian American students whose parents tended to be very clear and firm about their high expectations.
No room for misinterpretation.
Exactly. But on the other hand, while Mexican immigrant parents also deeply value education, they might be less inclined to communicate those expectations in such a direct way.
So it's more about subtlety and nuance.
It could be. And this is supported by research from the 80s and even more recent studies. It seems the directness of the message does play a role.
Okay, pathway number 2.
Pathway 2 is about fostering a child's belief in their own academic abilities, their self-efficacy.
So how much they believe they can succeed.
Exactly. It's about confidence. And when parents have high expectations, it sends a message that the child is capable, which can then boost their confidence and their belief in their own potential.
It's like, my parents believe in me, so I can believe in myself.
Exactly. And we've seen evidence of this with African American and Latino students, where parental expectations were linked to how they perceived their own skills in subjects like math and reading.
So their own self-image is influenced by their parents' beliefs.
It can be. Now, interestingly, things might be different for Asian Americans. Some studies suggest that they might, on average, report lower levels of academic self-efficacy, but they still achieve at high levels.
So they might doubt themselves more, but still perform well.
That seems to be the case. It suggests that self-belief might not be the primary driver of their success. It could be related to cultural tendencies towards self-criticism and focusing on continuous improvement rather than just current accomplishments.
It's like, I can always do better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on to pathway number 3.
Pathway 3 is all about parental involvement, how much parents are actively engaged in their child's education.
So things like helping with homework, talking to teachers, going to school events, all of that.
Exactly. And the link between parental involvement and positive outcomes, that's well established.
It's like being present and invested in your child's education makes a difference.
It does. But, just like with expectations, the type and effectiveness of involvement can differ across groups. For example, Asian American parents, while having high expectations and their kids performing well, they might be less involved in certain direct ways, like constantly discussing school or helping with homework, compared to, say, European American or African American parents.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to involvement either.
It's not. Their focus might be more on ensuring homework gets done, scheduling extracurricular activities, and maintaining a disciplined learning environment at home.
It's like setting the stage for success. And it's also worth noting that some research suggests that direct help with homework might not be as beneficial for Asian American students as it is for European American students.
And the triggers for involvement might differ too. For Asian parents, maybe a dip in performance might lead to more involvement, whereas for European American parents, it might be the opposite.
So it's not just about how much you're involved, but when and why you get involved.
Exactly. And then when it comes to Latino families, the evidence for involvement as a primary mediator of the impact of expectations is a bit limited. Factors like language barriers, lower parental education levels, and differing views on parents' roles in education, they all come into play.
It's a complex interplay of factors.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final pathway.
Pathway 4 is about how teachers perceive a child's abilities. It suggests that teachers might be more positive and have higher expectations for students whose parents also have high expectations and are actively involved.
It's like the teacher sees the parent's support and thinks, okay, this child has a good chance of succeeding.
Exactly. They might feel more motivated to invest their time and energy in those students, believing their efforts will be backed up at home.
It's a team effort.
It is, and there's research to back this up. Luro's work, for example, shows how a teacher's perception of parental involvement can influence decisions like whether a student gets promoted to the next grade. And other research has shown that Parents from lower socioeconomic backgrounds might feel less welcome in the school environment, leading to teachers having lower expectations for their children.
So making all parents feel welcome and valued, that's crucial.
Absolutely. And teachers, even unconsciously, might treat students differently based on their perceptions, as shown in Weinstein's research. They might give more encouragement, more challenging tasks to students they believe in.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but from the teacher's side.
Right. And then there's the potential for cultural mismatches, where teachers might misunderstand or misinterpret the efforts of some minority parents, which could negatively impact their view of the student's potential.
So cultural sensitivity and awareness are key for teachers.
Absolutely. Communication and understanding are paramount.
So what's the bottom line for our listeners? What have we learned from this deep dive?
The main takeaway is that parental expectations are powerful. They really do matter. But how strong they are, how they're formed, and how they work, all of that is intertwined with a child's cultural background. It's not a simple equation, and these dynamics can be vastly different across racial and ethnic groups.
We've busted some myths today, like the idea that past performance always predicts the future. Turns out it doesn't hold the same weight for everyone. And parental involvement, well, that can look very different depending on the family's background.
Exactly. It's all about nuance and context. And this leads to a final thought for our listeners. Given these complex dynamics, how can we, as educators and families, work together more effectively to ensure all students have the best chance of success? How can we respect different cultural values and approaches while ensuring every child feels supported and empowered to reach their full potential?
It's a great question. Maybe this deep dive will make us all think twice about our own assumptions about expectations and their impact.
I hope so. It's an ongoing conversation and an important one.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of parental expectations. It's a fascinating field, and we encourage everyone to delve deeper.
There's always more to learn.
There is. Until next time, keep diving deep.